Okay, welcome everyone to this session on the keys to a successful retirement. In this short segment, I want to go through just 3 things that you need to implement, if you like, in order to have a successful retirement. Now, the first one is more of a mindset issue, and that is, how do we have a Christian perspective on retirement? And of course, one of the big issues is, should Christians even retire at all? And here's the problem. The Bible is actually pretty much silent on this topic of retirement. In fact, there's only one obscure passage in the book of Numbers that talks about the Levites, the priesthood, retiring at 55. Now, I can't see you there, but I'm pretty sure some of you are thinking, oh, I wish I could retire at 55. Well, unfortunately not. The Bible, as I say, is pretty much silent on it. However, there is a fabulous passage. It's in Psalm 71 that I love, which I think really encapsulates how we should be thinking in our latter years. It says this, it says, "So even to old age and grey hair, O God, do not forsake me until I proclaim your might to another generation, your power to all those to come." Now that to me is a wonderful way to think about your latter years and running your race to the end and declaring the goodness of Jesus Christ and passing that on, that message, to future generations. That to me is what a successful retirement is ultimately about. And that's what I'm saying here. We need to have a kingdom perspective to how we're going to use the latter years of our retirement. In fact, I often joke with people, retirement is not God's waiting room, but it's God's engine room. You know, even if you're frail, you can still pray, and there's so many things you can do in your old age. And obviously, when you've got grey hair, usually you've got a bit of wisdom as well, and we can impart that wisdom on to future generations. So really, this is a great time of life where we can run our race to the very end and pass on the good news of Jesus Christ to future generations. In fact, there's a fabulous passage. This is in 2 Corinthians chapter 9. It says, "Do you not know that in a race all the runners run, but only one gets the prize? Run in such a way as to get the prize. Everyone who competes in the games goes into strict training. They do it to get a crown that will not last, but we do it to get a crown that will last forever." What a fabulous way to think about the latter years of your life, running your race for Jesus to the end. The problem that we have in our society is we're surrounded by all sorts of worldly messages. And so often as Christians, we're vulnerable. We hear the same messages as everybody else. And so we think retirement is just about us. It's about leisure time. Well, actually, that's not what the Bible paints as a picture. We should be using those years to glorify God and to use our time wisely while we have it here. But here's my observation. I've been a financial planner for over 20 years, and there's a couple of observations that I want to make. And that is, I really want to encourage you to work. Now, not necessarily work for money. Often people think, oh, is Alex saying I should, work until I drop? That's not what I'm saying. But what I'm saying is this. My observation is the longer you work, the longer you'll live. Working is a healthy thing. If we go back to the book of Genesis, we've got Adam and Eve, they were working in the garden, and that's how we should be thinking. We should be thinking that work is a good thing. Now, once again, it doesn't have to be paid employment, it could be in ministry, it could be doing all sorts of things that you're using your time wisely for. The second thing is, people that are working, they worry less. Guess what the number one fear of retirees is? Running out of money. Will I have enough money? Will it last me long enough? That's something that people worry about. Another thing is, when you're engaged in work, you tend to be more interesting. You're engaged with what's going on in the world, you're engaged in the workforce, etc. So that working is a positive thing. And my certain experience is it's healthier. I've seen so many, particularly men, they retire, and 6 months later or a few years later, they're sick and they pass away prematurely. So working is a healthy thing. God built us to work. Once again, if you look at the biblical, go back to Genesis, what did God do? He created the world in 6 days, and then on the 7th day, he rested. And that's how we should be thinking about our lives. So get up every day on purpose. And this is the key issue for believers ultimately. We have to get up every single day on purpose. So whether you're in the workforce during your working life or when you get to retirement, you've got to get up every day on purpose. And that to me is how we should be thinking about when we come to thinking about retirement. So it's having that right biblical mindset to how we're going to use those latter years of our life. So that's the first key factor. The second key one is this. You need to know your numbers. Now, I want to unpack what I mean by that. Now, to me, there are 3 key numbers you need to know. The first one is, how much does it cost you to live? And what's it going to cost you to live in retirement? Now, during your working life, maybe you've got a mortgage, you've got kids at school, you've got a lot of expenses, but you can pretty much work out that once you get to retirement, ideally, your mortgage is paid, your kids have left home, and so you should know, and you want to work it out, how much it is you need to live off in retirement. What's it cost you? Okay, that's the first number you need to know. The second number you need to know, once you've done that, is to work out, okay, well, how much capital do I need in order to get me that income? Do I need $500,000? Do I need $1 million? What is it do I need in order to give me that income that I know I need to live on? Now, of course, we don't know how long we're going to live, but we need to do various very simple projections, by the way, and I'm going to show you how in a moment, but you can do all these calculations online very easily. Nothing what I'm saying to you is complicated. It's something you can work out very easily for yourself, and I'll show you how to do that in just a moment. But the last one is, once you've worked out, okay, this is how much I'm going to spend in retirement, and therefore I know how much capital I need, the next thing you need to work out, the final one, is how much do I need to save in order to get there? And then, of course, sort of beside that is, well, how much can I afford to save? Because maybe during your working life, you've got a mortgage, you've got high expenses, maybe you can't save as much as you need, so which may mean you need to work a little bit longer and so forth. So we can explore this in a bit more detail, but they're the three key things you need to know. So let's just unpack it a little bit more. So as I said, the first point here is, how much do you need to live off? Now, there are three different ways that you can work this out. The main one I encourage you to use is doing a budget, okay? So in other words, looking at how much you spend and then asking, well, okay, will I be spending that in retirement? Will I, hopefully your mortgage is paid off, your kids have grown up, so your expenditure will fall. So that's the first thing, do a budget. The alternative to that, there's a simple formula that is generally accepted in the financial planning industry, and that is that in retirement, you need about 75% of your final salary as an income in retirement. So if you earn $100,000, you need about $75,000 per annum in retirement. That's a rough guide. The financial planning industry has also got a number of what I call industry statistics that gives us a bit of an idea as to what people need in order to have a comfortable retirement. So those statistics roughly show that for a couple, you need about $65,000 per annum as a minimum to have a comfortable retirement, and for a single person it's about $45,000. So that gives you a rough indicator. Now, because I've been doing this for a long time, I can assure you that there's wide variation. Depending on the kind of working life you had, the job you had, maybe you need a lot more than that, and I know people that can really live on the smell of an oily rag. They're just used to living with less, they're very modest in their lifestyle, and so they don't need as much. But the important thing here is to work out, what do you need in order to have the retirement that you would like, and that you feel that you should have based on how you spend your money. So they're the three key factors that you need to look at. Now, the second thing, as I said, once you work out how much you're going to spend, we need to work out how much capital you need. I call this your target capital. How much do you need to retire on? So this is what you're going to set as your target for the future. Maybe you're 45 today, you're going to retire maybe at 65. How much capital are you going to need? That's what we're going to have to work out. Now, it's going to be based on a few assumptions here. We need to make assumptions, obviously, about how much you're going to spend. We have to make assumptions on how long you're going to live. Now, as a general rule, as a financial planner, when I project this, I usually take the younger spouse's life expectancy, which more often than not is the female, and project 5 years beyond their life expectancy. So a typical female these days will live to 85, that's the average, and so I usually project to 90. So we go a bit above and beyond to make sure that you don't run out of money too soon. And of course, these days, as you know, I'm sure many of you have loved ones and grandparents that have lived to well into their 90s. So we need to allow for that sort of assumption. We do make basic assumptions about things like inflation and rates of return. If you are using any of these online calculators, my strong recommendation is you be very conservative. In other words, you use low rates of return, for example, so that you don't underestimate how much you actually need. Because the whole idea here is to have these conservative assumptions so that we make sure that you can get to where you need to go. So that's absolutely critical. Now, there's a few different ways you can work this out, this target capital, and I want to give you two really simple ones. The first is what I call the Mickey Mouse method. Okay, this is the really simple one. It's to take whatever your income is that you need, let's say it's $50,000, and multiply it by 20. Okay, so 50,000 times 20 means you need about $1 million to retire on. Okay, once again, if you need 75,000, multiply it by 20. Very, very simple calculation. Literally get out your calculator and go times 20, and there's your target capital. Okay, so that's really, really simple method. More slightly complicated method, although it's not really complicated because thanks to the wonders of the internet, you can now go online and do your own calculation. Now, I use regularly a one by AMP. It's their retirement simulator. So if you go into Google and type in AMP retirement simulator, you'll come up with their calculator. And look, there's lots of them on the internet here. And you can play around with a few just to see how they work and the assumptions that sit behind them. But ultimately, what we're trying to do here is to work out how much capital you need to work towards. So that way, during your working life, you can work out how much you need to save and work towards this target amount. And that way, when you get there, of course, you can retire. So that's the basis for that, knowing your target capital. And then the final part of all of this, of course, is how are you going to get there? What are you going to do and how much are you going to have to save in order to get you to where you need to go? So the first thing here is, well, how much do you already have? How much do you have saved in an investment or in your superannuation fund? Always exclude your family home, because your family home is not so much an investment, it's a place to live, and it doesn't give you an income in retirement. The only exception to that, and this is quite common, is many people downsize in retirement. They've got the big family home, the kids have moved out, they don't need a big place, they're going to move into an apartment, and therefore some of that capital will actually contribute towards retirement. But for most of us, let's just assume that the family home is excluded and we want to work out our starting point. Maybe I've got $50,000 or I want to retire in 20, 30 years. How much am I going to need to save per month to get me to where I want to go? And here's the good thing with this. Once again, there's lots of easy savings calculators where you can key in the final amount you want to achieve, and then you can put in how much you've got today, put in a very basic assumption about return, maybe like 5%, and you work towards, and it will then spit out how much you need to save per month. Now, why is that important? Because here's the thing, the calculator will show you this is how much you need to save, but then when you've done your household budget and you go, well, the calculator says to me I need to save $1,000 a month, but I know I can only afford to save $500 a month, am I actually going to get to my target capital? Am I actually going to get there? And if that's the case, then it may well mean you have to work a little bit longer, or maybe you have to lower your expectations in terms of the income you're going to have. So you can play around with it here to work out, well, what's realistic? Because ultimately here, you want to set these goals and you want them to be realistic. But anyway, that is the three key numbers you need to know. What's my income requirement? What's my target capital, and how much do I need to save? Okay, so that's the second key success factor. Then the final one is this, and this is really important when we talk about investing in retirement, because often people get to retirement, their natural assumption, if you like, is to become more conservative, and it makes sense. You get to retirement, you've no longer got an income coming in from your salary, and so you think to yourself, I better be a bit careful with this money. And that's all well and good conceptually, but it's very important that when you get to retirement, you create a growing income stream. If you think about the cost of living, what happens every year? The cost of living goes up. We have this horrible thing called inflation. Normally it's around 3% per annum. Unfortunately, since COVID, it's gone up quite a bit more than that. In fact, at 1% it was about 10%. But the point is that the cost of living goes up over time. And if you retire at 65, the cost of living over the course of your retirement may double or even triple over that period of your retirement. Therefore, we need to invest, and once again, this is the key words I want you to pick up, is you need to invest to create a growing income stream. Okay, that's the key issue. You've got to create a growing income stream. Now, how do you do that? Well, basically, you've got two main asset classes that are going to help you to achieve that. Let's start with the share market. Let's pick on a company. Let's pick on Woolworths. Now, most of you use Woolworths. You probably shop at Woolworths maybe once or twice a week for your family groceries. And what we want to think about is when you buy Woolworths shares, you become a shareholder, which means you're entitled to some of the profits that Woolworths makes. Now, as the Australian population grows, you would expect that Woolworths will continue to expand. They'll have more shops and there's more people buying. And so their profit, you would expect, will grow over time. And historically, if you look at Woolworths and its history, you'll see that that very thing has happened. You know, it's a successful company, it's very big, it's got shops everywhere, and its income continues to grow. So you as the shareholder who's retired can live off the income stream that those shares are producing, and you can assume that those dividends will go up year after year. Now, they won't go up every year. You know, occasionally we get a downturn, we get a recession and the dividends may fall. So there are seasons when incomes can fall. But overall, the income stream should grow. And when you're investing in shares, you should be aiming to invest in shares where there is that growing income stream so that over the course of your retirement, you are keeping up with inflation. Now, this is why it's an important issue, because people often go conservative and they put their money in term deposits. Now, term deposits are fine to park money, or if assets are overvalued, it's fine for a temporary period, but you don't want to have your money in term deposits for a long period because the income never goes up. The interest rates may rise and fall, but they never actually go up. So you never get this rising income stream. And so term deposits are a terrible tool for retirement, but many people put their money there because they're conservative. They don't want to lose the money. And that's why it's important, and this is another topic in itself, we need to diversify your money so you don't have it all in, like I'm not suggesting, for example, you put it all in the share market, but what I am suggesting is that you need to invest in things where the income grows so you can finance your retirement over a 20 or 30 year period. So that's the first asset class. The other one, of course, is property. Now, Australians tend to love property. I get clients asking me about property all the time. Should I buy an investment property? But like shares, it's the same concept. If you buy an investment property, what's the one thing you need to do every year? You need to put up the rent. And so ideally, the rent goes up, year after year, and that is your growing income stream. So you want the rent from your investment property to keep up with inflation. Now, rent typically does that, so it's generally not a problem with property, likewise with the share market. But the key issue here is that you have a growing income stream. And so my key point for you when I say thinking about retirement is you need to make sure that your income in retirement is growing at a rate that's equal to or greater than inflation. In other words, your purchasing power is not eroding. Because when you've gone back and you've done that first calculation I talked about how much income you need, you've got to remember that $50,000 in income today is not $50,000 in 20 years. In fact, $50,000 in 20 years is only going to buy you half the amount of goods that 50 grand buys you today. And that's why, as I say, you need to invest in a way to get a growing income stream. So there you go. That's my 3 key things for you to do. Adopt a biblical mindset towards retirement. Ask yourself, what's God's plan for you in retirement? What's He wants you to do with your life, your calling, to run your race to the very end, to glorify Him? What's He wanting you to do in those latter years of your life? Very, very important question to answer and to be comfortable with, so that you use those latter years of your life productively. Then, as I said, we need to look at that. We've got to know our numbers. We've got to know those 3 key numbers. What's the income? What's my target capital? And what do I need to save year in, year out, month in, month out, in order to get me to that target capital? And then, as I said, lastly, when we think about how we're going to invest that money to get to our target capital, we need to create a growing income stream. So there you go. I hope that's been of use. Obviously, there's lots of things we can talk about with retirement, superannuation, all sorts of other things. But I just wanted to give you a few key nuggets to help you to have a successful retirement. God bless.